Welcome back to American Christian or Christian American. I'm Sean Legacy and I'm your host. This is episode 9, and now we've finally made it to the United States after doing a lot of background. And now we're going to start from issues starting right from the beginning. Why are we in the situation that we are in now? How did things start out in the United States? And a lot of times people are always talking about the founding fathers and how great they were and what they did in this country. Well, they weren't really that great. We put way too much emphasis on them because they want to make this country greater than what it actually is. Because there was a lot of corruption that happened, especially since the founding fathers were racist people, people who had slaves. And the beginning of this country actually slaughtered the Native Americans of this country. And we're going to get into that more. This country did a lot of evil things. Were there good people here? Yes, they were. There always has been good people, but many times they've been outnumbered, or the power structure that exists has kept them down, and they didn't know how to fight back. Over time in the United States, different fights took place that had actually improved it. I don't have a lot of pride in the beginning of this country, but I do have some pride in the people who stood up to make it better. Let's talk about some of these things as we continue on American Christian or Christian American. Okay, so we're getting back now. We're going to talk about the founding fathers, which everybody praises all the time, their great wisdom, the establishment of this country. I'm not doing that so much because the founding fathers, along with early U.S. presidents, were slave owners. They say they believed in freedom, but they only believed in freedom for some. This is a country that was established for white people. It was not established for anybody else. And you say, well, the Constitution says all men are created equal. Well, we're going to talk about the fact that enslaved people were counted as 3/5 of a person. Do you think they meant those people when they said all people? Or do you think they meant the Native Americans in all people when they were murdering them, slaughtering them? In fact, we can say that this was the great American Holocaust. I'm not taking anything away from what happened during World War II. That was horrible. But it is not the only Holocaust that's taken place. Look at the Native Americans were almost wiped out. They could have been, if they had any inkling of the technology we have today and still had the same attitudes, they probably wouldn't be here at all. We intended as a country to wipe them from the face of the earth because they were in our way of the land we wanted. We didn't care if they were here first. So is this freedom? No, it's not freedom. It's freedom for some at the expense of other people. And that's not true freedom. We're gonna continue with this. First of all, George Washington owned slaves, and we're going to look at them as presidents as well. He owned 300 enslaved people. Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe, Benjamin Franklin. He only owned 2, but he did make quite a bit of money off the slave trade himself, and later he changed his mind on it. He would fight for freedom of slaves until he died later on. John Hancock, Patrick Henry, George Mason. All right, now let's go over to the listing of presidents. And this tells us here, first of all, the president, the approximate number of slaves they had. So it may not be exact, but it's giving us an idea. And then we have, did they have slaves while they were in office? Okay. George Washington had between 250 to 600 slaves. Yes, he held them while he was in office. You can look this up on Wikipedia, list of presidents of the United States, and there's other places you can find information. So if you're at all, if you're saying, well, I don't believe this, well, look around. Put in stuff and find this stuff out because it's not hidden. There's quite a bit of information out there. Thomas Jefferson held between 200 to 600 slaves. He says he was against it, but he was in debt. Okay, well, wait a minute. If you believe something, then you free those people. But he liked the money. He made a great deal of money off of his slaves. And instead, he could have just worked as a simple man doing a simple job. But no, he would rather earn his money off the backs of other people. James Madison. He had 100 plus slaves. Yes, he held them while he was in office. James Monroe held 75 slaves. Yes, while he was in office. Andrew Jackson, around 200 slaves. Yes. Martin Van Buren, only one slave. And no, he didn't have the slave when he was in office. William Henry Harrison, 11 slaves, and no. John Taylor, 29 slaves. Yes. James K. Polk, 56 slaves. Yes. Zachary Taylor, 300 slaves. Yes. Andrew Jackson, 9 slaves. No. Ulysses S. Grant, 1 slave. And no, he did not have that slave while he was in office. Slavery is what this country was built on. Murder is what this country was built on. Greed and power. They broke away from England because they didn't want to be controlled by the king. But they turned around and subjugated and controlled other people. I don't think they learned much. They just didn't want somebody controlling them, but they wanted to control other people. So, how do you justify the beginning of this country? You can't justify it as far as decency. You can't justify it according to treating people right. You can't justify the formation of this country on anything that's good. You can't justify it on biblical principles because it's not. You can justify it on white Christian nationalism or nationalism that came through Catholicism. You can justify it with that, but you cannot justify it in any positive way. This country was built on slavery. It was built on the slaughter of Native Americans. It was built on greed and power. Now, I'm not proud of that. I'm not proud of the formation of this country. But what I am proud of is the people who stood up over different periods of years to make things better, to get rights for other people, whether for themselves or somebody else. Because people of all different nationalities have stood up for positive things. And I do believe in the earlier time when the settlers came, there were good people who were just trying to find a new home. So not everybody was of this mindset, but the majority were. And the power structure kept the people who wanted to do positive things from doing very much. It took time for people to start to band together and say, this is wrong. Even if they didn't know all of the history, they could see this is wrong. People who really studied the Bible could see, no, this is not right. This is not what the Bible teaches. But this is what this country is built on, and guess what? It's still here. We still deal with it in this country. Has it gotten better? Some. But right now, presently in 2025, it's getting worse. We're heading back. Because the people who have been there all along, the hateful people who claim God, the white Christian nationalists in this country, who really are out for power and control and money, are trying to drag us backwards again. Well, it's time that everybody learns what really has transpired. So if you learn history, if you learn what the Bible teaches, then you will be able to decide what's real and what's not, what's made up power structure and what's not. Let's go on. The doctrine of discovery had a terrible result, and this is what's believed here, even with the Native Americans. They took away the land. They justified it, because remember, the doctrine of discovery, if they're not Christians, they could take the land. In January 1891, the bodies of Lakota Sioux are seen wrapped in blankets 3 weeks after December 29th massacre by U.S. forces at Wounded Knee on the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. So this is the result of American freedom. This is the result of American ideals. This is the result of our Constitution. The Constitution we designed for white people and nobody else. And it talks about the papal bulls that that instructed the Portuguese crown to invade and capture and vanquish different areas. People were considered pagans. In other words, they weren't Catholic, enemies of Christ, and put them to perpetual slavery and take away their possessions and property. This is all what it's about. Non-Christian lands, parts of Africa, and restating the legitimacy of enslaving non-Christian people. All right, so this is what it's about, folks. This is what this country has been about, and it goes back. Justification came from Catholicism. Catholicism was under Constantine in the beginning, and his idea was the power of the church. And even if he didn't say that, there was not a quote to say the power of the church with the power of the state, we can conquer anything. And that's what he did. It was not bringing church people together and giving them a break. It was about using that power, the ability to use God, a higher being, commanding them to do these things. This is where all the injustices have come. God is always right, folks. The Bible is right. But mankind takes the Bible and twists it to its own meaning. That's why it's up to all of us to have vigilance. Let's look some more. All right, so now we're going to go to the Constitution. All right, so first of all, we're looking at the Constitution, Article 1, Section 3. Representatives and direct taxes shall be appointed among several states which may be included within this union, according to their respective numbers, which shall be determined by adding to the whole number of free persons, including those bound to service for a term of years, and excluding Indians not taxed, 3/5 of all other persons, which is what African Americans or black people in this country were categorized as 3/5 of a person. Okay, so what they were able to do is if you had a large number of slaves in your state, you could, like adding and subtracting fractions, bring those 3/5 of a people all together and get a number of free people, so to speak. Utilize that number so you have higher representation in Congress. So what they did is they used slaves, again, to gain power, but they didn't do anything for them. They did it to maintain white power. This is what our Constitution was based on. It was based on power and control of people who were subjugated. To call them 3/5 of a person. Wait a minute, Sean. We have the 13th Amendment that freed the slaves. Yes, we do. But this Constitution also has a clause that says they were only worth 3/5 of a person. At some point, this country has to really realize that our Constitution has a lot of flaws. And even though we have these different amendments, it's time to draw up a new Constitution. Now, I'm not saying throwing the Constitution away. I'm saying sitting down with people when people mature in this country, when enough people mature in this country to sit down and design a new Constitution that in the beginning, when it says all men and women are created equal, regardless of what they look like or anything, all that stuff can be in there and from the beginning. Because it doesn't matter with this Constitution saying all men are created equal when we know they didn't mean all men. They didn't mean black men. They didn't mean Native American men. Who did they mean? All white men. And they didn't include women. So I think in this modern society, it's time that we build a Constitution that is built for all of us. But we'll have to get 2/3 of the country on that thought pattern. It's not going to happen soon. I probably won't live to see it. But when this country actually tries to do a little bit better, it will happen. Other countries do a lot better than the United States does. So now we've got the Second Amendment. All right. So let's go to the Second Amendment in here. This is talked about and talked about and talked about in this country. The right to bear arms. Did I go past it? No. Second Amendment, bearing arms. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed upon. All right. A well-regulated militia. This is key here because the Second Amendment was not designed for what they talk about today. The Second Amendment was designed much more sinister than that. So first of all, the Second Amendment was ratified to preserve slavery. That well-organized militia, all right? The real reason the Second Amendment was ratified and why it says instead a state instead of country. The framers knew the difference, when you see the 10th Amendment, was to preserve the slave patrol militias in the southern states, which was necessary to get Virginia's vote. So Virginia wouldn't vote for it unless they had this in here. Founders, Patrick Henry, George Mason, James Madison were totally clear on that, and we all should be too. In the beginning, there were the militias in the South. They were also called the slave patrols. They were regulated by the states. In Georgia, for example, a generation before the American Revolution, laws were passed in 1755 and 1757 that required all plantation owners or their male white employees to be members of Georgia militia, and for those armed militias members to make monthly inspections of the quarters of slaves in the state. The law defined which counties had which armed militias, and even required the armed militia members to keep an eye out for slaves who may be planning uprising. Okay, so this was all about the slave trade, to make sure that we kept people enslaved today. Okay, again, the Second Amendment. Talking about here, the Second Amendment, the right to kill black people in slavery and Reconstruction. States, so going here, guns were central to that, in the militia was central to that there was a massive fear of a slave uprising and revolts of black people fighting for their freedom and willing to do whatever it took to be free. With each rumored uprising, you see the rise of legal infrastructure in terms of laws banning the enslaved from gun possession, as well as the rise of slave patrols and the militia in order to curtail the control of black people. The slave patrol was a smaller unit that did the kind of regular routine, going through the slave cabins looking for contraband, looking for weapons. Okay, the militia was there to backstop the slave patrol so that if the uprising was too large, more than the slave patrol could handle, the militia would come in. All right. All right, so we're done with this stuff here. Why is it important to talk about all of these things? Because without understanding history, without understanding context, we repeat them. If we don't understand how this country has functioned, if we don't understand how history before this country, we don't understand how history of mankind, throughout the entire history since we were created by God, there have been many people who have gone astray and done what they wanted to do. A few people have followed God. God has given us opportunities all the time because he wants us to be with him. But many people disconnected from God will seek to fill that place within our existence that needs power. We need power, but we need God's power. We don't need humanistic power. The people who strive after humanistic power will never get enough. It is stronger than any drug out there. It is stronger than anything. And people have power in different degrees. People like Donald Trump and other people who are high up in a position are seeking power of people following him, giving him praise, and the power he can have over people's lives. When harm he does over people's lives, it's the power he has. Elon Musk, the same way. And then individuals who don't necessarily have the power to pull people together like that will seek power by being part of the group that goes after these power hungry people. So his supporters, they seek power in being connected to what appears to be strong. His supporters see strength in rallying around the idea that white people are first. Make America great again. What does that mean? It means let's make America where white people are in power again. Let's make America where white people have dominance again. Let's make America where we keep white people on top. Why do you think that we're deporting people in this country? Why is such a focus? Because we're afraid of the white numbers going down. We're afraid that white people could lose control. That's what it's all about, folks. That's what white Christian nationalism is about, because white Christian nationalism is not about Christianity. It is about power and control and wealth. This is not God's plan. They holler God, but they're hateful and cruel and mean. As we continue to look at the history, we're going to show that Christians, who were people who claimed to be Christians, were murderers. People who claimed to be Christians were torturers. Now, that doesn't mean that all people who are Christians are that. That means there is, like it has been throughout all of history, a certain group of people, or with a large numbers, have tried to manipulate God and praise God in the way they want it to be, in the way they can gain political, economic, social power. Not the way God wanted to be followed. Not the way God wanted to share his love with people. That's not what white Christian nationalism is about. And here's another explanation of a term: racism. Let's understand this, what it means. First of all people can be prejudiced. Doesn't matter what you look like, where you come from, all people can be prejudiced. We can prejudge somebody. Now, I've driven bus for years in my life, city buses and stuff, and years ago, I had a person get on my bus with spiked hair, orange colors, so many earrings that looked like he snatched the metal market up. And in my mind, I thought, oh, he's going to be a problem. The man got on the bus, paid his fare, said, I don't remember what he said, but he was polite, nice, and he sat down and didn't bother a thing. And another guy in a suit came on and was a complete jerk. So, you see, all of us have issues with prejudice. Even if they're small or whatever else, we prejudge somebody upon different attributes that we have associated with different problems. And they may be true in some cases, but that doesn't mean they're true all the time. Now, whether or not I think that he should do that to himself with his hair and whatever else had nothing to do with the idea of how he was going to respond, how he was going to treat me. Nothing. But I prejudged him. All of us do that to some degree, and we all have to think about it. But everybody can hate because somebody is different, because of the color of their skin, because of whatever else. Now, even if you disagree with somebody in a morality issue, you don't have to hate them. All right, so all of us can be prejudiced. All of us can discriminate against somebody to say, well, we're not going to treat them equal to everybody else. All of us can curse at people and yell at people. All of us can get into a group and assault somebody who doesn't fit our ideals or for whatever we think is right. Whether or not you have the right notion as far as what they do or anything else does not give you the right to attack them and to brutalize them or to dehumanize them. But all of us can do that. But only white people can be racist. And I know somebody's going, oh, no, that's not it. Stop. You need to understand what terms mean. Racism indicates people that have the economic, social, political power in order to dehumanize or degrade or subjugate or deny education and other things to a group of people. In the United States, only white people have the potential to be racist because only white people have the power to keep or withhold education because they control the purse in this country. Only white people have the power to use the military or the police forces against because they control the power. So only white people can be racist. But everybody can hate, everybody can discriminate, everybody can dehumanize, but only white people can be racist. Now, all white people are subject to being racist in some way. So am I. How? We are born into a society that racism is ingrained into everything that we think. Everything. Not anything is without racism. Everything is molded into what we think. Yes, everything. Can we do something about it? Yes, we can. We are indoctrinated in this country. We can change how we think, how we talk, by studying things, by researching things, by meeting all different types of people. And don't just go to one, say, African American and say, oh, I learned from him, I got the whole picture. You do not. Just like Caucasian people, people are different. But if you go across a board and you talk to many different people and get their responses on things, you will get a consensus. They may not all agree on the same exact things, but you're going to get a consensus. If you can't take the time for that, don't call yourself a Christian. If you can't take the time to understand other people, don't praise God, because you're missing the entire point of the gospel of Jesus Christ. We are to reach out to people. This is not about all the things that we want. We have to take the time to care about people. Will you do that? Do you do that? And even if you have done it some, you haven't learned everything. I've learned a lot of things. And you know how much I know? Very little. I've learned a great deal. And I'm continuing to learn. I can't always have all the answers, but I know enough that it really bothers me that this is not about the gospel of Jesus Christ. This is not what this country should be like, even if it is a secular nation. We should pull together and care about other people. And we have to stop thinking that people who are in like Christian nationalism, who are hateful, people who 5 years after Roe versus Wade was passed is when they started talking about abortion. Up until then, it was mainly segregation and keeping people apart. They didn't talk about abortion until 5 years after. See, it isn't about abortion. It may be about abortion to you, to some people out here. But realize the people who are in the center of this don't really care about stuff like that. They care about greed and power and making this a white-only nation, and to get as many people out as they can and to deny the freedoms of others. And we're going to go farther and deeper into all of this as we go on. Thanks for watching. See you the next time on American Christian or Christian American.